Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the TaleTalk English. My name is Madison, and today I want to share a story that changed the way I see love, trust, and myself. It is a story about waiting for the right person, believing in my values, and learning that self-respect is more important than any relationship. What happened to me was painful, but it also made me stronger. If you have ever felt pressured to become someone you are not, I hope my story reminds you that staying true to yourself is never a mistake. I grew up in a quiet town in Alabama where life moved slowly and people knew each other's names. My parents were simple people who worked hard and believed in honesty, kindness, and faith. They were not rich, but they gave me everything I needed. More importantly, they taught me lessons that stayed with me throughout my life. One lesson stood out more than any other. My parents believed that intimacy should be shared with someone who truly loved and respected you. They told me that my body was mine, my choices were mine, and nobody had the right to pressure me into anything. As a teenager, I listened carefully. While many of my classmates were dating, I focused on school, reading books, and spending time with my family. As I got older, people started asking questions. Some were curious, others were judgmental. "Why don't you have a boyfriend?" they would ask. "Are you waiting for a prince?" Sometimes they laughed when I told them I wanted to wait for marriage. Their words bothered me occasionally, but I never changed my mind. I believed there was nothing wrong with waiting for someone who truly valued me. Years passed. High school became college, college became adulthood. My friends started getting married and having children. Social media filled with engagement photos, wedding pictures, and family vacations. Sometimes I wondered if I was falling behind in life. Sometimes I worried that maybe everyone else was right. But deep down, I still believed in my decision. By the time I was 32 years old, I had never been intimate with anyone. I had gone on a few dates over the years, but none of those relationships lasted very long. Some men lost interest when they learned about my values. Others simply wanted different things. It was disappointing, but I would rather be alone than compromise something important to me. At the time, I worked at a local library in Birmingham. It was not a glamorous job, but I loved it. There was something comforting about being surrounded by books every day. The library was peaceful. People came there to learn, to dream, and to escape their worries for a while. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, a man walked through the front doors carrying a black umbrella. His name was Carson. He was tall, well-dressed, and had an easy smile that immediately made people feel comfortable around him. He approached my desk and asked for help finding a business book. I showed him where it was, and we started talking. At first, it was a simple conversation. We discussed books, travel, and favorite movies. Before leaving, he thanked me and said he hoped to see me again. The next day, he returned. Then he came back a few days later. Soon, our conversations became a regular part of my week. Carson had a way of making people feel important. He remembered details about my life. He asked thoughtful questions and listened carefully when I answered. When I mentioned my favorite author, he surprised me by reading one of her books so we could discuss it together. Nobody had ever shown that kind of interest in me before. After several weeks, Carson asked if I would like to have dinner with him. I was nervous, but I agreed. That first date felt effortless. We laughed for hours. He told stories about growing up in Tennessee and working in real estate. I shared stories about my childhood and my dreams. When the evening ended, I found myself smiling the entire drive home. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful about love. Over the following months, our relationship grew stronger. Carson seemed kind, patient, and mature. He never pressured me. He never rushed me. Instead, he made me feel safe. One evening, while we were walking through a park, he reached for my hand and asked if we could talk. His expression was serious. "Madison," he said, "I really care about you. I think this relationship is becoming something special." My heart raced. "I feel the same way," I admitted. His smile widened. That was the moment our relationship officially began. For several months, everything felt wonderful. We spent weekends together, visited small towns nearby, and tried new restaurants. My friends liked him. My coworkers liked him. Even my parents seemed impressed by him. One night, while we were sitting on a bench overlooking a lake, I decided to tell him something important. "There is something you should know about me," I said. He turned toward me. "What is it?" I took a deep breath. "I've never been intimate with anyone." For a few seconds, he was silent. Then he nodded slowly. "Okay." I felt relieved. "I want to wait until marriage," I continued. Again, he nodded. "I respect that." Those 3 words meant everything to me. I remember driving home that night feeling happier than I had felt in years. Carson accepted me exactly as I was. At least that was what I believed. About a year into our relationship, Carson proposed. It happened during a weekend trip to the mountains. We were standing near a beautiful overlook as the sun disappeared behind the trees. He got down on one knee and pulled out a ring. I burst into tears. Of course I said yes. For weeks afterward, I felt like I was living inside a dream. I called my parents, I told my friends, everyone celebrated with me. Finally, after years of waiting, I had found the man I believed I would spend the rest of my life with. Wedding planning began immediately. I searched for dresses, looked at venues, and spent hours creating guest lists. Every detail filled me with excitement. Then, little by little, things began to change. At first, the changes were small. Carson started making comments about waiting. "We're getting married anyway," he would say. "What difference does a few months make?" I would smile politely and change the subject, but the comments continued. Eventually, they became conversations. Then they became arguments. One evening, he looked frustrated and asked, "Don't you trust me?" The question caught me off guard. "Of course I trust you. Then why are we still waiting?" I felt uncomfortable. Because it was not about trust. It was about a promise I had made to myself years earlier. I explained this to him, but he seemed unsatisfied. As the wedding approached, his frustration grew. The patient and respectful man I had known seemed to disappear. In his place was someone impatient, demanding, and increasingly difficult to understand. Still, I convinced myself everything would be fine. I loved him. People change under stress, I told myself. Wedding planning can be difficult. Maybe he was just overwhelmed. I wanted to believe that explanation. Then something happened that shattered my entire world. One Saturday afternoon, I was meeting a florist when my phone rang from an unknown number. Normally, I would not answer, but something told me to pick up. "Hello?" A woman's voice responded. "Is this Madison?" "Yes." There was a long pause. The woman sounded nervous. "I know this is going to sound strange, but I think you deserve to know the truth about Carson." My stomach tightened. "What truth?" The woman introduced herself as Lauren. According to her, she had dated Carson 2 years earlier. At first, I assumed she was a jealous ex trying to create problems, but then she began sharing details that only someone close to Carson would know. She knew where he worked, she knew his family's names, she knew personal stories he had told me. My heart started pounding. Then Lauren said something that left me speechless. "You are not the first woman he's done this to." I felt cold all over. "What do you mean?" Lauren explained that Carson often pursued women who wanted serious relationships. He would earn their trust, talk about marriage, and create a future with them. But once they became emotionally attached, he would pressure them into crossing boundaries they were uncomfortable with. If they refused, he would leave. Several women had experienced the same thing. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to tell her she was lying, but then she sent screenshots, messages, photos, conversations, evidence. More evidence than I could ignore. For hours, I sat staring at my phone. My hands shook, my eyes filled with tears. The man I loved was not who I thought he was. That evening, I confronted Carson. At first, he denied everything. Then he blamed Lauren. Then he blamed other women. Finally, when he realized I had seen too much evidence, he stopped pretending. His entire attitude changed. The kind smile disappeared. The caring voice vanished. Suddenly, I was looking at a stranger. "You are making a big mistake," he said. "No," I replied. "I think I've already made one." His jaw tightened. "You'll regret this." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything, he still refused to take responsibility. Instead, he wanted me to doubt myself. He wanted me to ignore the truth. But something inside me had finally awakened. For years, I had worried about finding the right person. I had worried about being alone. I had worried about what other people thought of my choices. In that moment, none of those fears mattered anymore. What mattered was respecting myself. I removed my engagement ring and placed it on the table between us. "It's over." His eyes widened. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious." Then I stood up and walked away. Ending the relationship was one of the hardest things I had ever done. For weeks, I cried almost every day. I canceled wedding plans, I returned decorations, I explained the situation to family and friends. Each conversation felt painful. Some people were supportive, others questioned my decision. A few even suggested I should forgive him. But deep inside, I knew I had done the right thing. Trust is difficult to build and easy to destroy. Once it was gone, there was no future left to save. Healing took time. Some days were better than others. I started spending more time with friends. I joined a book club. I took long walks after work. I focused on things that brought me peace. Slowly, my confidence returned. Then something unexpected happened. I began discovering parts of myself I had ignored for years. I enrolled in online business courses. I learned about entrepreneurship. I started volunteering at community events. For the first time, my life was not centered around finding love. It was centered around becoming the best version of myself. Months later, I received another surprise. A local business owner planned to retire and sell her small bookstore. The moment I heard about it, I became interested. Books had always been my passion. The idea felt impossible at first, but the more I thought about it, the more excited I became. I used my savings, applied for a loan, and spent months preparing. It was scary. It was risky, but eventually, I became the owner of my own bookstore. The day we opened our doors remains one of the happiest days of my life. Customers filled the shop. Friends came to support me. My parents stood beside me, smiling proudly. That day, I realized something important. The life I thought I wanted had fallen apart, but the life I was building turned out to be even better. Today, I am 35 years old, and yes, I am still a virgin. Some people hear that and immediately judge me. Others feel sorry for me, but I don't feel sorry for myself, not even a little, because my story is not about what I haven't done. It is about what I refused to sacrifice. I refused to abandon my values for someone else's approval. I refused to ignore red flags because I was afraid of being alone. I refused to let another person's opinion determine my worth. Those choices made me stronger. Do I still believe in love? Absolutely. Do I still hope to meet someone special someday? Of course. But I no longer believe that happiness depends on finding a partner. Happiness comes from knowing who you are and respecting the person you see in the mirror. If the right man enters my life someday, wonderful. If not, I will still have a life filled with purpose, friendship, and joy. These days, I spend my mornings at the bookstore. I help customers find stories they will love. I organize community events and reading groups. I sit by the front window with a cup of coffee and watch people pass by. It may not be the life I imagined years ago, but it is a beautiful life, and it belongs to me. So if you are listening to this story and feeling pressured to become someone you are not, please remember this. Never betray your values just to keep someone in your life. The right person will respect your boundaries. The right person will never make you prove your love by abandoning your principles. Most importantly, never believe that being alone is worse than being with the wrong person. Sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from and share your thoughts about Madison's journey. And remember, your value does not come from another person's approval. It comes from the respect you have for yourself. Stay strong, stay kind, and I'll see you in the next story.